Okay, so the idea of this talk is that we explore together some new things that are happening in the browsers space right now. And let's try to do it like back and forth. If you have any question, like just interrupt me and let's discuss. We'll try to do some like coding at one point, and then everything probably is going to not work, and I will need help. So let's fix it together. And also, okay, so let's talk today about JS in CSS. Actually, we had a talk already of CSS in JS that Macarena gave, and we also had the SVG talk that Mariana did, and there is also a talk that is going to come soon about these three. So this is also going to go in that line. And what we are going to see together today is Houdini. So these are a series of new APIs that will allow us in the future to extend CSS. Like right now, that is not possible. Like all the polyfills that we have available are done or at compile time, or for the dynamic part, we need to use JS and do some like really like non-performance stuff. And with this, we are going to be able to, are you seeing the mouse, no? When I share the screen?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay,
yes.
Cool. So we are going to be able to define our own kind of paint functions, and we're going to be able to use it as if they were native to CSS. So for example, like this is Roche.js that we have been sharing it a lot. Like it's really cool how they did it. And for example, like we will be able to say like, okay, I want that this div is going to have a background image of like, I don't know, a zigzag. And also like the border image is also possible. So this will allow to define like design systems to help the design people, like help us a lot to create the applications. And as we said, like right now, what we can access from JavaScript is quite limited. Basically, we have access to the DOM, and we can manipulate it. That is quite well done, the API. But like we have like partial access to the CSS OM that will be like the equivalent, the document object model is the DOM, and this is the CSS object model. And this is a very old API that has like a lot of problems, and we only have like partial access to it. And all the other stages of the render and pipeline are like black boxes to us when we develop. Like there is like layout algorithms, like we have like now Flex, and we have Grid now available, and like that really help with like 99% of the designs right now. But if we want to like do our own layout, for example, masonry or something like that, that is not currently available, we have to resort to these non-performant options and like very contour options that they will not feel native to CSS. So the idea of these APIs, the Houdini effort, that is a standard effort, is to try to create APIs that every browser is going to be able to expose, because every browser is a little bit different. Well, more or less the stages are the same, but they need to like equalize there what they are going to offer. But the idea is to try to offer, for example, like there will be at one point a CSS layout API where we will be able to define like the equivalent of like a grid or flex, that we will be able to say like this has this other display that I define, and like, I don't know, place things at random in the screen, place things in a mosaic. Like we can define how things are going to work out. And also there will be like for each stage, there will be like a set of APIs, like the painting API, the CSS Paint API is going to allow us to do what we saw before with the Rush.js, basically defining this like functions that we are going to be able to paint. And then like there is a lot of things that are not defined. It is like a moving target right now. But like there are some things that are more or less stable. And these things that are stable are the ones that we're going to discuss a little bit more in detail today. Like one of them is like the evolution of CSS OM. Like let's call it like the CSS OM like 2.0. That is called CSS Typed OM. We're going to see how JavaScript is going to be able to access the styles in a better way. This is part of the CSS properties and value API. Later, there are going to be also things about like how CSS parse and about the cascade. There is going to be maybe something to there too. And then the other main group is like the worklets. And in particular, these worklets, they work like a service worker, let's say. Like it is not a web worker that spawn another thread and it has their own event loop, their own context and everything separated, and you can only communicate using like post message, and that's totally separated. That is quite heavy to do. Like you can obtain like really good performance, but it's quite heavy to do. So you cannot like spawn like 1 million of them. But with worklets, they're a lot more integrated, and they don't have an event loop, a separated event loop. They are part of the like they are attached to the main loop of execution, and basically the rendering pipeline when it is executing is going to be calling these worklets. You're not calling yourself, like you are defining them, and then it's kind of like you can think of it as if you were able to do plugins for the render pipeline. So like the browser is going to let you do like CSS plugins, let's say. First, like let's take this out of the table. Like, is Houdini ready yet? Like there is a site. Then later in the slide you can go to the links. There is a site that is tracking the state for all the browsers. This is like Microsoft Edge should be like more or less green right now because they are going to go with the Chromium engine. So they are going to have support. But like everybody is on board, but there is a lot of specs that are not like ready to use. And basically nothing is in production right now. But anyways, it's good to know what are the capabilities that we are going to have in the future. And this is like, if we want to develop products or something like that, like the future is not that far away. And also there are polyfills for these kinds of things. Like there is one from Google Labs that is a CSS Paint polyfill, for example, and there is another one for the CSS Typed OM. And this is interesting because when you have this polyfill, basically it allows you to create, like as we said before, like other polyfills and plugins, and later you won't need other polyfills because you can create them using this one. This also like is quite fast in Firefox and Safari because they have like some custom APIs that are allowed. In Internet Explorer and other browsers, it basically is slow. But well, like you can also, later we are going to see that you can also do progressive enhancement, and only like, I don't know, if it's not capable to be able to use this, instead of a polyfill, you can just show like a normal image or whatever, and you don't show like these kind of cool features to the users that cannot support them. So let's start like with the APIs. The first one that we're going to see is the Typed OM. And this is an API to be able to manipulate CSS from JavaScript. And basically, right now we have this kind of APIs, that are like the CSS OM, like currently in the browsers. Basically, we can get an element and get their style. And for example, like we set the opacity, like that is a number. And then when we read it, actually what we get back is a string, because everything in CSS OM right now is a string based. So like you set numbers, and this actually is converted to a string when you set it. So actually, for using this kind of stuff, you have to like create a lot of helpers and start to parse like value and like do regex, and like it's really, really complicated. And it's something that everybody that is working with CSS OM has to do. And it's a pity that the browser is not like directly giving us that information. Like it has the information to give it to us. So the evolution of this basically is that we are going to be able to express typed units like in JavaScript. Like for example, like here we are defining like an EM, like 2 EMs, or like a number. And there is going to be new APIs to be able to set and get the styles, but using like typing information. So like we can say like set this to EM, and when we get it back, we are going to get like an object that is of type CSS unit value, and it has a value and a unit, and we can already like use it. For example, like with Agustin in Layouted, we ended up doing exactly this, and like having all these regex and helpers to do exactly what the browser is going to offer to us later. There are other, like this attribute of style map is a like a map-like object. So you can also ask like if it has a particular style, you can delete it, you can iterate over them. So it is like a lot more ergonomic to what we are used to in JavaScript. And there are other like Type OM is not only about this, like there is other kind of like computed style that also return these things. And when you start to like take into account like calc and all this operation in CSS, you are going to get that back. Actually, like you're going to be able to have like the tree of operation, and you're going to get like a CSS transform object, and like that it has like several units inside. So like all the information that is in CSS is going to be available for us to work comfortably in JS. Again, like as usual, like they are using like so long names, like really, really long names. We are going to have to do jQuery like helpers to be able to use them. And then you have like a lot of like CSS numbers, CSS pixel, like there are shortcuts to create these units, and like under this namespace, you are going to have like all the tools like to work with this. So that is Typed OM. That, as we say, is part of this properties and values API. This part about like CSS only exposing to JavaScript using strings is not only for like the style prop member. It is also, for example, like for the custom properties. Like until now, when we define like a custom property in CSS, that custom property basically is a string based. So you can put whatever you like there, like you can put a paragraph there about of a book, and like CSS is going to say, oh, okay, like yeah, give it to it. And that's a problem, because like there is a lot of things that doesn't work if CSS doesn't know what to expect. For example, if it doesn't know that the custom property is a color, you cannot animate it, because it doesn't know how to animate, like if you can pass between black and a number. So this is another thing that we are going to be able to do. Like there is a new API that is called register property, where we are going to tell CSS what this custom property, like what it is. And so we are going to be able to say like, what is the name? What is the syntax? And here is the type. For example, it can be like color, it can be like a length, a percentage, an image, a URL, like an angle, time. Like you can really be specific about what you accept. And this also is very interesting because if you, for example, you say like this is going to be a time, and somebody type in CSS something that is not a time, that is simply going to ignore it, because it really, like with this, is able to follow all the rules of CSS. And then you also have an initial value. This is something that also before we were using something like putting in the root all the custom properties, so we can put the default value. And now we are going to be able to say like, this is the default value if it's not set for that particular element. And also something that it was not possible to do before is to define if it is inherit or not. Like the default right now is true. Basically, like if you define a custom property, everything in the DOM, like all the childs of that element are going to inherit that property, for example. And that makes sense for things like color or like the font family. So you can say like, okay, this body is going to be like of this font family, and like everything just flow from there, and you don't have to set it in every paragraph or element or whatever. But it doesn't make sense for like things like margin or for border or for something like that. Like imagine if you have like I don't know, like a div with a lot of children, and if you define like the border for that one, and now everything below that has a border, and all the childs have border. So it's very good that we are going to be able to control also how we want our custom property to behave. If we want it to behave like a color or like a margin. And even further in the future, like this is like a even draft, let's say. This is not quite ergonomical for like people like using CSS. Like they will like to directly say like, I want to define like in CSS a property that is called foo, and this is going to be like the type, the initial value, and if it inherits or not. So later, like we are not going to, like it makes sense that these custom variables are directly in the style sheets. I don't know why they started directly with JavaScript like for this, but this is a draft for the future. So let's do some playing. Let's see if this works. So we have like a little playground here. Can you see the screen? Well?
Yeah, we can.
A little small.
What?
It's a little bit small. Can you make it a little bit bigger?
Let's see.
Perfect.
Like that?
That's perfect.
Okay. So here we have like an example where we are defining like, let's say like this is going to be run like in JS. This is the like a CSS for this particular thing that we are showing. And this is the HTML. So basically we have a div and we are like defining some style for that div. And right now this is commented. So what we have here is like, we are defining a custom property that is the color green. And we are defining like that the background of this div is going to be a linear gradient that is going to go from that color to red. And like this is just what is the sizing. And then when it is on hover, we are changing that custom property to be blue. So when we go there, like it changed. But if you notice, we are trying to do a transition for that custom property, and that is not working. Like it should take like 2 seconds to go from green to blue, and it's not working. And this is what we said before about the custom properties, that because they are just strings, the engine of CSS doesn't know what to do about this. So like let's define the register property here. So if we do this, basically we are saying that there will be a custom property with name color. It will be of type color. The initial value is also green, and it inherits because it's a color. So when we go there, you can see that now it is properly doing the transition. So this was not possible before, and like now it's possible. And this is something that like we can do with other things. For example, like let's say like that we put like a border radius of, let's say, radius, and let's define a radius of, let's say, 1 PM. I'm missing the bar. And I'm putting a lot of this stuff. Okay, so this is what I say to you, that you have to help me, because
yes, we are watching.
This is really confusing for me. Like I know that at one point, like in 10 years, like these two dashes are going to be like really common for us. Like, but I don't know why they decide that. So help me, please. So here we define it a radius, and we can also like on hover. Let's try to go like to, let's say, 5 AM. So if I go to the hover, like there is nothing happening. Also because we didn't set the transition for that. But still, nothing is happening. And this is again like this 2 AM. It is a string for the engine, so it can be anything. So again, we are going to get this, and we are going to register. Wait, this is the radius, and it's going to be of type length, and it's going to be like 2 AM, let's say. It doesn't make sense that it will inherit. So we now have a new property register that is of type length. Basically, this is the, like it can be like 2 AM, pixel, or whatever. So we go there and it doesn't work. Wait, it doesn't work. Somebody can spot it. Let's try that again. I think that there was a problem with my let's see if that will work. Position. We're going to have a limit of like 30 seconds, and if not, we pass to the next. So radius 0. Let's say okay. It doesn't like it, and now it like it. Okay, so this is kind of things like we can discuss later in JavaScript. Why the initial value, if it is in EM, is not working. I think that there is a problem here that the initial value cannot be dynamic properties. So you cannot depend on something that like EM, you know, like it depends on the font size. So like for register property, you have to use something that is absolute. So this is why it didn't work it before. So now you can see that is properly working, and we can have like this nice circle animated with custom properties. So till here, like any questions about like why CSS OM is evolving, like custom properties or something? Like we have a lot of people of UI that can help me answer if I don't know.
I wonder, you cannot transition the border radius without the Houdini hack? It won't work? I was wondering because you have pixels, units, and you have numbers, so you're not using strings. And I was wondering why you wouldn't be able to translate.
Like if I remove this,
yes.
If I remove this, it's not working, you see?
Yes, and why? Do you know why?
It has to do with the fact that custom properties, like if you don't register the type, the engine treats them as a string, and like it cannot interpolate between like two strings that can be like something that is totally random, because like you can use this property for a lot of things. Like do you remember that like before we were defining that like a var that included like several things smashed together and everything, and we were setting this as a background when we were playing the other day, and that doesn't have a type. That is just like some random string that you can just like paste there. So the engine needs to know what is the type to be able to do the interpolation. I don't know if yeah, that's the reason. Like maybe like it's weird for us, it's counterintuitive, because we are seeing that we are using it for the border radius, but you have to think that this radius variable, you could have used it here, and you could have used it in a lot of other places. And sure. Like, I don't know, like putting an, like maybe an after element, using this radius as a string, or like you can do whatever you want with that variable. So when the engine is trying to like interpolate between the two values, it cannot say, this is going to be only used for the border radius, so I'm going to treat it as a number. It has to say, okay, like it's a string, I bail out, I don't know what to do, and then everybody use it as whatever they want. But if you directly say to the engine, this is going to be a length, then you cannot use this in other places that would require a string. So you are kind of like removing that flexibility that give it the string base, but like you're getting like more compatibility because of that.
Yes, now I get it. Thank you.
Matthias, just curious, if you declare the initial value like pixels, but then you use actual values with relative unit, EM or something like that, the animation is going to work?
Let's see. So let's say that we start with 2 AM, and yeah, it's working correctly. So like we put, let's say 7.
The problem of initialization.
A circle. So the problem is just for the initial value. I actually like today in the morning I got a error message that was saying like you cannot set dynamic properties there. It made kind of sense. I don't know, maybe they could take the initial EM of the browser and use that. So I think this is a gotcha that a lot of people are going to fall into. But like we did. But yeah, a good thing that you mentioned that. Also something else, like because we have like these initial values, we could actually remove this and is going to, well, actually it's going to have the initial value that we have here, but is correctly getting the initial values that we have here. If we remove this properties registration, then there is nothing, because actually this radius variable is not defined. This is not defined. So border radius give an error and is ignored. Background gives an error and is ignored. And only when we hover, we are defining that two custom properties, and then we are seeing the result. So that's actually also helps there.
Matthias, something really basic, but
some other question, or we move to the more like fun part? Okay, so let's close this. And before moving into the Paint API, that is like the more interesting of the APIs that are now like solid, and they are not going to change that much probably. We need to like review a little bit of Canvas, and this is also good because we saw the other day like how SVG work, and the other way in the browser to do graphics is with the Canvas API. And basically what you do is you define like a Canvas element in the HTML, and that Canvas element is like a whiteboard. You're saying to the browser, like in this particular element, I am in charge of drawing, and it gives you like a low-level procedural model. It's not like SVG, that SVG give you like a declarative syntax, and like you can directly put like the tree of all objects. This is quite low level. How it works is like in CSS, you're going to like access the Canvas element, and from that Canvas element get a context. This indirection is needed because there are actually like several contexts. At this point, there are only two, but there could be more later. What we have right now is like the 2D context, where you can draw, like if you will do like in a Paint application. And then you also have like the WebGL context for doing 3D. And basically once you get the context, you draw in them. Like if you are using the Canvas to do some animation or something like that, yeah, this will be in a loop with a request animation frame, and you will draw in each frame. You're going to redraw the entire scene. Like then there isn't any object model. You are like drawing every little line every time that the function is called. You can decide actually to leave everything as is, or clear and install again, or like draw on top, but it's like really like using a Paint. And why this makes sense, like to have like an option with the SVG, it is like the SVG is part of the DOM, like all the elements, you can access them, you can put event on them, like you can, like it's like a model that allows for a lot of flexibility, but in exchange, you are giving up performance, because if you know that what you're going to draw is not like, the interactivity is not going to be at the element level, like using DOM events and these kind of things, like you can directly with the Canvas API, like draw something very quickly. And actually there is a lot of tricks later to, like, I don't know, draw off a screen and then reuse it. And like, there's a lot of things that you can do with an API like this. And how it works, basically, like the context has a lot of functions where you're going to define what is a fill style. Like it's always about like, what is the current scene that you're doing? So what is the current fill style? What is the current stroke style? This is exactly the same notation and is in SVG. Fill will like fill the shape, and stroke will draw the line. And then you have like line width also to define like what is the line width. You have a lot of methods like line cap that this define like how that line that you're drawing is going to end, if you like round it or like directly with a square corner. There is a lot more of this kind of styling method. You have things like draw a rect or an ellipse, and then you can whatever you draw is not going to do absolutely anything. You first have to draw the thing, and then you have to tell the canvas, the context to, okay, now what you have in this particular moment, now you stroke all that. So basically, for example, like with path, this is like the equivalent of the SVG P element that Mariana showed the other day. Instead of having that string where you say I move here and line there, and directly with the M and L, here is a lot more verbose. And what you're going to do is you have begin the path, then move to this point, as Mariana described the other day, you take the pen out and you place it in that particular point, and then from there you can line 2 or quadratic curve 2, Bezier or arc to other points. So you can draw the path as if you will be using a pen, and then when it's done, you can decide if you want or not to close the path. This will be the theta that Mariana also talked about, and then you can decide what you're going to do with that path that you draw. You fill it, you stroke it, or you fill and stroke it. You can do whatever you want. So let's say that we know how Canvas HTML5 works. Now we go to the Paint API. What the Paint API is going to allow us is basically to define a plugin where inside that plugin, the rendering context, the rendering pipeline is going to say to us this div, you told me that you want to paint it with this plugin. Okay, this is the context, directly a canvas context. Draw whatever you want there. I'm going to give you what is the geometry of that context, what is the width, the height, and you do whatever you want there using JavaScript. So you can do really cool things. These are some examples from Vito. I don't know what. There is some cool web pages. So for example, you can do these slanted backgrounds or really cool effects. Then later you just say this div is going to have this particular style, and it's done. You include the plugin, the Paint API worklet for this as some kind of library, let's say, and then you have new CSS capabilities. You can do things masking, for example, and do really cool stuff that is quite complicated to do without introducing tons of extra DOM elements and masking and a lot of CSS and JS and HTML just for doing an effect that in this particular thing is just one line of CSS. I want this to work like this. There is also you can also do borders or whatever. This is, for example, using mask. So it's really cool. We are going to actually I think the people from UI people going to have to be very careful, because if not, the web is going to look like a bazaar, because there is a lot of things that you can do, and nothing or maybe it's going to be very fun. So these are some examples. How it works, the API, it's you have to do some steps. Basically, you define a module that is going to have the plugin, the worklet. How you do it is that you create a class that it has a method that's called paint. And to that method, the rendering pipeline is going to give you the context, the geometry, and what props, CSS props are available. And here, this context is like the one that we saw, the 2D context of Canvas. You can do whatever you want. You draw ellipses, you draw path, you fill a stroke, whatever you want here. You can also like include other libraries here and like do, I don't know, maybe you can include raw.js directly and use that to draw the things. And then in the module, you have to register that paint, like using this function that is part of how the API works. So you just say like register paint this. I don't know why they choose to put a class. Here it looks like, oh, classes are available, like we have to use classes for everything. Currently, like all the frameworks are moving away from classes, like React, Vue was going to use one and it's not going to use. So like, I don't know, like why this is not like one particular function which there is other things that you have to define in the class. Later we're going to see it, but everything could be done without the class. And then when you have this module done in your HTML or like in your script tag or like somewhere in your JS, you're going to basically like load that plugin. So you are going to say like CSS paint worklet, add a module, and you give what is the module that you want to load. And it's like this that we can have like libraries. We can distribute these particular modules, and then you're going to load the ones that you, like the plugins, the CSS plugins that you're going to be using. Once you do this, in CSS, you're going to be able to use the Paint API, and you give an ID of one of the modules that you define it. So in this particular case, like we are defining like the model name is Painter. And so we are saying like this div is going to have like a background image of Painter. So like there are some steps, but these are mainly going to be like libraries, or like we are more like library author mode when we do this. So this is not that complex. And this is just like the equivalent of like an import for a particular library. As we said before, you can also do like progressive enhancement. Directly, you can say like in CSS, you can use the support to see if like you can use the Paint API, and if not, like do something else. Actually, like you can also directly fall back with the like a more like normal pattern. Like you can say like, for example, like background image, like this URL, and then if this is going to fail in CSS, it's going to fail silently because CSS is very permissive, and you're going to use the fallback directly. And I have a question here for the UI people, maybe you can help me. When you do this kind of fallback, the URL like that you are requesting here, do you know if the browser starts to request it, or it actually like finish rendering this and it sees that this URL is not going to be needed, so it discard it, and there was never a request if this paint is available?
I think that
yes, I think it's requested also, yes.
You think it's requested?
Yeah.
I don't have the correct answer, but I think that it requested, because CSS goes line by line. It's not like JS or anything.
It's going to request it, and then it's going to replace it with the second declaration. And if it's something that the browser understands, it's going to follow the second line. And if not, it's going to fall back into the first one.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we should read a little bit about that. Maybe the browser implements something later after that stage to say like, okay, like this actually was like nullified because of this, and so I'm not going to request it because it is something so common that I imagine that it will be really good to have that performance optimization. But if not, like we should use something else, like because we are going to.
I think that maybe if we use some kind of media query that says add supports and the name of the technology, maybe you can use that to avoid the fallback in the first place.
Yeah, like this one. But I think this is so common that at least I hope that it will be implemented. But okay, we can thanks. So, and also like you can do it in JS. So in JS, this is really needed. This is not only about progressive enhancement. Or you use a polyfill. So this paint worklet is going to be available. Or you actually check before adding the module, because if not, it's going to fail and you're going to have like a white screen. More in our days of frameworks where if JS doesn't work, it's a white screen for sure. Okay, so this is, let's go again to play again. So here we have like, again, as before, like the register property, we have the CSS and we have the HTML. And like we can check, for example, let's copy this so it's easier. So we can add a border to see what is the div. And here, this is the module. This is already like the playground is already doing it by itself, but it's already calling for us this CSS page worklet module with this particular paint API that we are defining. So here we have like the context. We have the geometry that you can get the width and the height, and we have props. So for example, like what we can do is, let's say like we define like there will be a fill style of black, let's say, and we are going to do a rectangle, starts in 0, 0, and goes to width and height. And then we are going to fill it. So we have a like very boring like API, but we are already using this background image painted. Basically a solid color, but it's something. This particular method, the input properties, if you want to read anything from that element, you need to include it in the array of properties that you're going to define. So for example, like this is going to be like, I don't know, for example, let's say like we are going to read the color and we are going to read, I don't know, like a size. And how it works is like you request it. You say like, I want like the color, is props.get, because the prop is like the map. And you're going to have like the color, and then cons.size is going to be like props.get that size. So with this, we can say like, I want actually to put like color. And here we are going to be able, supposedly, to say like color red. And we can obtain like the variables, like the properties here, and the same we can do with size. And Mariana showed also the other day that with SVG you can do a lot of things that are really, really cool with background images, and it makes a lot of sense to use SVG for a lot of cases. When it makes sense to use this more like Canvas API is when you need like to have like here you have JavaScript and you have like loops, you can like control flow, you can do like branching, you can do whatever you want. So you can get the props and you can like do a for loop that is going to evaluate to a function. You can include whatever, like you do random numbers, for example, like you can do like a lot of things that are like, or even not possible to do in SVG. So like the two technologies has their their own things. And for example, like I have some examples here. So this one in particular, I got like an SVG, and I use a tool that is directly mapping the path to like move to Bezier curve tool, like directly using that. And here I'm getting like a function that's called CSS logo that I give the context where I want to draw it, the scale, and the style. And this is, we didn't saw it before, but in the same way as SVG, you can define transforms. And so basically this define like the current transform. You're going to say like, I translate the full canvas, and then you draw there. You scale the full thing, and then you draw like with the same numbers, but now it is scale, because this is the current transform. And you have these functions that are very useful, where like if you call like the CSS logo and you are doing something here, afterwards you are going to have this current context with like noise, let's say, from calling the function, because it's really like an API that is, everything is global for that particular context. So how it works, like to be able to like work with this in a same way, is that, for example, here, when I'm defining a translate that I know it only needs to apply to this, I'm going to save the current context. I'm going to work, it's like a stash from Git. Like I'm going to work with that, and then I'm going to restore how it was before that particular save point. So as I said, like low level API. But in this particular one, for example, like we are defining like the color and the scale. We are also defining like the scale as a property that is of type number. And because we are defining this, we are going to be able to use it in a transition, like both the color and the scale. And for example, when I hover here, like I can get like the effect that I'm doing this. Like this actually, it doesn't make that much sense. Like it will be a lot better to just use SVG than to like, this actually end up being like a lot more code. But I just wanted to show you how actually this works. So let's do something that is more interesting for like the Paint API. So in this particular one, we are grabbing like, we are drawing circles in the div. So if we go, we define like, where is this border? Like we have it here, the div, and we are just drawing inside different circles. And I have like here, for example, like the effect is cool. Like you can have like this kind of effects that is not that easy to achieve with SVG, because every element like is in a particular position. And like I'm using here, for example, like this random generator that I'm using. This, you're not seeing it here, but I'm including it. The math random of JS is actually like every time that is going to like Paint is going to define something totally new. So for example, like if I remove this line, this is going to be like the effect when I'm like working with it. So this is like quite bad, let's say. It can be something that you want. So what we are doing is using a random generator that you can define a particular seed that I'm defining as a custom property. So each element is going to be able to say like, my seed is, I don't know, like this is 20 at the beginning, but I can say, for example, like let's say, let's create like another div. And just for Agus, let's put a section. And let's like that. And here, okay, maybe we can put something like this. Okay, so now we have like two we can grab the second one. For the first one, I don't know which one is that one. And let's say, let's change the color to see that we are selecting another one. So yeah, okay. CSS start with 1. Awesome. So this is the 2, and here I can define, for example, like the custom property, the seed. For this is going to be something else, like 45, let's say. And now we have like two different patterns that are like completely random but stable, let's say. And this is like, we can also set the opacity, we can define other things here. Like something that is cool, like you can also, for example, like if we remove, let's check just the code a little bit, like here we are just getting the custom properties and we are iterating for like count times. This is also a variable that we are defining here. We can say like, I only want like 10 circles, let's say, or I want like 40. And like by count times, we are like beginning a path using like the fill style and the global alpha, like the opacity that we define it. And we are using an arc to do a circle, and then we fill it. Here we can also, like, there is also like a context ellipse we could have used. We could also like stroke it, for example, and we have like this stroke effect. Or like we can, let's say, we can remove the opacity. And there is something that is, let's see, it's called like global composite operation, where basically you say to the composition engine in Canvas, when I draw something, what I want that to do. So for example, like instead of like the default is just draw on top, like you will do in Paint. You draw a new line, you draw a new circle, it's going to, like, you don't see what is behind. But there is a lot of things that you can do with the composite. That this is also like the stuff that maybe is going to be available later to modify, but in Canvas it's already there for us. And for example, like we can define like the global composite operation is going to be a sort operation. And that means that every time that we put a circle, we are going to see if there is a pixel painted in that point. And if there is already a pixel painted, we are going to do a sort operation. And you're going to say like, okay, then don't paint anything, then put it blank. And so every time that we are putting like a new circle, you can see that we are like, when we are going very far away, like you can see how the effect works. So these two circles are doing like a sort operation between them. And when you put it like that, you can like have like quite nice like effects. And this is the only code that you need. Like if you will do this with other technologies, you will need to download like a lot more to be able to do this kind of effect. Or like this has the same capabilities of an SVG. Like when I'm like resizing, this is going to redraw and all the pixels are going to be perfect. Like this is not just an image. So that particular one. And then, I don't know, like we can do like other things. For example, like here we have like a kind of like borders, like bottom and top. And we can do like something like this, like we define like I'm going to do these two paths, one at the top and one at the bottom. And for each path, and actually like evaluating like a function that whatever I want. So in this case, I'm using like a scene, and then like I'm multiplying by another scene to give like this modulation. And you can like modify all the line, the size. Like we could, I don't know, like for example, like if we want, here the cycles are like 10. So there are 10 cycles at this moment. So we could say something like cycles equal 10 by default, and then we use this C. Let's pass it there too, like see here. So we're going to, let's say, we're going to register a new one. That is just called C. And it's also going to be an integer. The default is 10. And let's just get it. So we define that this is, we want C also, and we get it from here. So now we need to pass it to the function. Supposedly, like we just like did the plumbing to like pass this value there. And like if we go to the div, we define like the cycles are going to be 20 now. There should be 20 cycles now. So like we can control and create like APIs that are like well, basically whatever we want. Like here inside the div, you can put text, you can put other divs, you can do whatever you want. So you can also like do borders. This is not only for like the background image. For example, like here we're using like the border image. And for how we are painting, we are like count times. We are just moving at a random point in the width height, and we are going, like we are drawing a line to another random point. And so you can see here how it works, and you can have like this kind of like weird effects. And here you can see like if we don't define the sieve, it's going to like be in this case it's not that bad the effect. So like I'm not going to do more playground. So like if you have any question that you want to try, now is a good time.
Yeah, I have a question regarding the debugging part, because I was reading a few minutes ago that it's not allowed, but anyway, you can use like a console log. But do you try to debug the code?
Yeah, and actually like we are getting like proper errors. So like if we have here, there is a thing that the playground that I did is actually like if I do an error, for example, like let's say like I do like this, that is like directly is not compiling, it's not going to like it evaluate and it try and it's not raising the error. But if I do, so let's see, that shouldn't have been an error. So there is nothing there. But if let's say like I do something like, I don't know, count it. So here there's a variable that is not defined. So if we go to the error, I'm going to see like, for example, like reference error, like count it is not defined. Okay. So we are getting like proper errors. How this is working, actually, you cannot, at least for what I saw, you cannot add the model, like every time that I modify this, I cannot like re-add or like the module, this painted. I have actually to start a new web page like from the beginning and like load it again. So this is actually like this thing is a iframe. Like, so what we are seeing here is an iframe that every time that I'm modifying the JS code is going to do the iframe again. Okay. Here, like if we modify the CSS, I can actually directly go into the iframe and only get that style sheet and modify it. So that is why like animations work and all this is very like more responsive. But when I'm modifying the JS, it's totally new, this part. But for what I saw, I'm having like proper errors. I'm using Svelte for the playground, and like some things I'm getting errors that are a little bit more difficult to debug, but maybe it's that I'm not as accustomed to it. But about this, like it's fine to debug.
Okay, nice. And also, do you try to add some CSS rule? Like, I don't know, if you need to work just with media query or something like that, there is any support from the API? Or
what do you mean by that?
I mean, probably know about this example, but the previous one that you showed us, probably if you need like override some effect just to, I don't know, a small screen, like there is any rule to do that?
Everything work like this paint API like directly like plug into CSS and everything work before, like all the rules, all the media queries, the supports, like everything work. You can do whatever you want with it. You're only like in this particular thing is not even like background. It's like background image because we are using the shortcut. So the only part where we are like plugging into the rendering engine is in like using the background image. Everything else is exactly the same as before. But I don't know if I understood the question.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, but yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, I understood. I got it.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was wondering, can you animate those background SVG that you are generating?
What do you mean? Like, what do you mean by animate?
If you want these circles to move around in the background image, because I know as with SVG you can animate the file and you can call it as a background image and the animation still will be playing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering, now you are using a background image that is painted with a lot of SVG circles.
Yeah, for example, like, let's say like we can have like noise, let's say like 10, and we get the noise here. Grab the noise. Let's don't even do the. So here, let's say instead of like a random width and height, where the arc is going to be is also going to have that noise added up. And let's say like, let's do a +2 so it's something else. And so now we basically have a way to move like the circles like this. Let's say not that much, like we should, let's say maybe add another random or something like that, but we could say if the noise is going to be 50 or 50 and which one? 2 seconds. You can actually use the keyframes and everything with this also, with the variables that you're defining. And we're going to need to actually define.
Wow.
So, but imagine that we can put like some random here, and this is going. This should be a stable too. So let's say, you see?
Yes, I'm making you work hard. I was wondering, what is the performance with this? I think that you mentioned something about it before.
This should work at 60 frames per second, because look at the code that we are executing. It's nothing. Like this look complex, but it's just like a for loop, and actually count is at 50. Like we are drawing 50 circles on the screen. This I'm not having it will be nice to have like these frame per second thingies, but this should work at 60 frames per second. There is something else about this. this worklet right now is not like that, but everything is, the API is defined, so it can be done in another thread. This is not going to consume your main thread budget. So when you're actually like doing SVG, like that happened in the main thread. When you're doing this, right now, no, because the browsers need to implement it. But at one point, this will go into another thread. And so you are even going to be able to do more stuff with 60 frames per second.
That's great. That's incredible.
Do you have other questions?
Can you click on any of those? I think that the answer is no, but I see the background image. But
no, you can. This is for the DOM and for the DOM events and for everything. This is totally opaque. This is why it's fast. When you move the mouse around this, it's one div. There is nothing more. So you cannot do that. What you can do, if you're doing like some kind of like graphing editing or like something like that, or even like for something simpler, is when you click, you grab the click from the complete div, and that has information about where you click it. And then you have your own object model in JS, and you can check what are you clicking. But it's everything, you have to do it yourself. So basically you are giving up all that wonderful event tools and all that DOM stuff for having like this raw performance. But at the same time, if you want to get back to something that is like interactive, you have to put a lot more work into that.
I'm sorry, Matthias. You say that the click event is endable from the painted function, painted class?
Actually, like how it will work if you wanted to do it like that is that when you click or you move something or something like that, you are going to be editing custom properties, and then like you are going to read it in the paint always through the custom properties. This is isolated. It doesn't have access to the DOM event. It doesn't have access to all of this because of what I said, that they need to be able later to move it away from the main thread. So you will actually, like, I don't know, you click in a particular circle, and maybe you're going to define that, I don't know, a custom property that say like the ID of that circle, like, I don't know, show only that, and then you read it from here, you only show that one. But it's all like
it's just that you need to know where that circle is from outside of the canvas drawer.
That is true, and for that, I don't know. We should investigate. Probably, if that is the case, you will already pass where that circles are to the painted as a custom property, and then all this random thing will happen in the other side. For example, like this will be.
Yeah, there will be plenty of workarounds, of course.
Yeah. It's. I don't think the idea is to use this for that kind of interaction. Like if you're already going that way, maybe it makes more sense to like don't have that raw performance, and because like we are doing this because we want to have like this ergonomic, and this is really easy to use. But if because of doing that, we are having to write like tons of code for the interaction between the two things, it doesn't make sense.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, we can get back later if you want. So like, if you want to learn more, there is like these pages where I got some of the ideas for the examples. Like with this, and I think one of these one we already saw the other examples. There is like an awesome CSS Houdini where you have all like the typical awesome list where you have all the resources. And like there is a lot of things, like there is a very good videos like of Una Crafts, Surma, that they explain this really well. And that's it.
Mati, where do you think after you try this, it's going to be the new Polyfy framework, or what do you think?
I think this is.
You can work with both together.
But what do you mean that the new polyfill, or what do you mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's like the new framework to manipulate CSS with JavaScript. So
yeah, I think once this is stable, we are going to see like a lot of things that we were doing in JS move it to libraries, to like these plugins that we are just going to include, and this is going to help a lot mainly for the people that like that separation of concern, for the UI people that are able directly to use them in the style sheets without all the like ceremony of like defining a class and like going in JS, obtaining that, like doing something else, and that was killing how we can work with this. And actually, like when like all the Houdini APIs are done, like I don't know, they will open a lot of possibilities. Like this is the like the Paint API, but the ones that we don't saw, that like for example, like there is an animation API where you can define your own kind of sprints, so you can animate things that right now is required like heavy JS stuff, are also going to be able to do in CSS. The layout thing is quite interesting too, like to be able to like do layouts in a single line, like in the same way like we do with Flex and Grid. Like, so I think that we are like, what this will enable, I think, is also something like what happened with JS when Babel came out. So with Babel, we were able to like modify and try a lot of things, and like JavaScript is really easy to polyfill also, because like you can edit whatever the objects, the global object there are, so you can monkey patch everything. So we are very used to do that in JS. And if the browsers do a new API, we are using it like 1 year before it's done. And we don't care. Like, I don't know, like we discussed yesterday about the stable sort function. We can use it and we just include the polyfill, and that's it. It's not hard to use. But in the CSS crawl, it didn't have that until now. So I don't know what will happen when that start to play out. How they are going to, I think they are going to be able to iterate a lot faster, to try a lot of things in userland, to see what works and what not, and like later inform the standard of what should be standardized in the same way that happened in JS nowadays.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Okay, nice talk.
Okay. Do you have any more questions? If not, we can like discuss later in JavaScript. Like I think we went a little bit over time. So
I have a comment. Yeah. Very well improvised, Mati.
Yes, you should surprise us more often.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it only happened like once in a while because I didn't sleep that much yesterday, so it's only once in a while. Okay, so let's put stop recording. Okay, thanks.